the name of this session, From Pilot to Platform and Scaling Digital Innovation Citywide. It is, as most people in local government know, much easier said than done. And so the purpose of this panel is to really explore what the steps and processes look like in trying to do this, some of the pitfalls and hurdles, how they can be overcome with the help of the private sector, with the help of local business. So let's jump in. I'm going to hand over to the panel to introduce themselves so that you get to know who they are. And it's more interesting than me sitting here and reading a paragraph of what they've done with their lives. So, Sadaf, I'm going to hand to you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Sadaf Motsafarian. I'm based in the UK. I work at Microsoft. I've been at Microsoft for almost 15 years now in several different roles. I'm very pleased to be here because I am actually leading the worldwide public sector solution sales team. So what does that actually mean? I am responsible for driving the go-to-market strategy for Microsoft globally when it comes to public sector organizations, which spans across government, higher education, academic research, but also defense and intelligence. And it's great to be here and to build the connections with everyone.
Thank you very much. Warren.
Thank you. Hello, Warren Smith, Director of Insight, Innovation and Impact at Posterity Global. We help organizations to modernize their procurement for people and planet, but we also wear some very long titled hats for the United Nations. So I lead a working group on intergenerational procurement for people-centered cities, which is part of the UN's International Telecommunications Union. And I'm also vice chair of the Innovation Enhancing Procurement Drafting Team for the team of specialists on innovation and competitiveness policies. So quite a mouthful, but so part of the UN family as well. So great to be here and look forward to the discussion.
Lovely. Thank you, Warren.
Yeah, good afternoon also from my side. My name is Sophie Naue. I'm working at UNITAC, the United Nations Innovation Technology Accelerator for Cities. That's an innovation lab from UN Habitat, but also UNOICT based at the Hafen City University in Hamburg. We do short-term innovation projects, so more or less pilots, but I'm also like the idea how to scale those pilots that we're discussing today. Working mainly in the global south, so mainly pilot projects in Africa, in Latin America, and also some in Asian countries. Working with a team of data scientists, developers, and urban planners to build up technical and digital innovation, but also supporting member states in their digital transition.
Hi everybody, I'm Raj Mak. I'm Head of Digital City and Innovation for Birmingham City Council. I've had a long history in Birmingham. I've been with Birmingham City Council for about 35 years. I know it doesn't believe it. I look far too young for that, but it's true. I've been in the digital space for about 20 years. That's 2005 we started. I think it was just the dawn of broadband coming in when we first started talking about digital technologies. I've been lucky that I've been leading the Digital City program for a number of years. We initially started off recognizing how important it was bringing city partners together, the ecosystem of the universities, the corporates, the city institutions, saying how can we support the city to develop digital technologies to support citizens and business to recognize this fantastic new thing called digital coming along. That was our role. I've then moved on to look at how we evolve our digital city agenda to a smart city agenda. And we were one of the first cities to produce a smart city roadmap. And I think we were that victim of where we identified something like 39 projects that would help us to become a smarter city. And there were lots of proof of concepts in there, many of which died, delivered fantastic results, but really struggled to scale. So what we've learned over the last few years is really taking a different approach in terms of how we develop our proof of concepts and how then we can make them much more sustainable. So it's an opportunity really to share some of that experience with you.
Thank you all very much indeed. First question then, and Raj, I'm probably going to just come straight back to you here. Why is this so hard?
I think there are lots of barriers in the way, certainly from taking a proof of concept into full scale. There are a number of things we really need to do beforehand. innovation is fantastic, and certainly working with universities and different partners and entrepreneurs, they are bubbling with new ideas. And what we do as cities, we want to exploit some of those ideas. We want to think, I think what we didn't do and what we've certainly learned from is to make sure that before we embark on anything, we need to ensure that we have an owner. We need to make sure we're addressing a challenge. And once we've identified the challenge, then we can look to see how we bring that technology in. And even bringing that technology in, we have a number of issues. We have a lot of legacy systems as a local authority that struggle with integration is one of the big issues around here. We also have issues around capacity and development of our own skills capabilities. So we see the technology, we can see how other people are developing it. What we don't understand often is how it could scale within our own organization and not have the right people in place to help develop and scale that further. So there are a number of issues around. I guess one of the biggest issues is the business case and developing the value on it. That's been a real big issue around smart city applications. We understand the value of data, but interpreting that data and turning that into a value proposition has always been a struggle. I think those are some of the issues that we're facing at the moment. The other issue I would say is leadership. Certainly in the smart city space, smart cities is an activity that's became really fashionable, and because of the overuse of the word smart cities, it kind of killed the leadership capabilities around it. And what we are now seeing is people beginning to understand the importance of data, infrastructure, and that value proposition beginning to come together. So there is now beginning to be that transition into understanding how we can move forward with some proof of concepts.
Thank you very much. I think that's for a big question. It's a very compact answer, and I think sheds really good light on some of those barriers. Sophie, you're involved in trying to move this forward, trying to scale urban projects in different places, different cities, different types of cities, different sizes of cities. What are some of the things that you've seen that can actually work in terms of removing or reducing some of those barriers?
Yeah, I will give you one quite concrete example. We have been working on mapping informal settlements using machine learning, using AI to understand how big parts of the cities are growing. We have done some pilots there, for example, in eThekwini in South Africa, where we used aerial images to map informal settlements, and we handed over the models that we developed to the city, so that the city can use them themselves. We have done that in like 9 different cities so far, but then the question was, okay, how can we scale this all around the globe, and how can we work? And then the question comes about partnerships, and at the moment it's a partnership that we're building up to scale, for example, for global models for mapping with the European Space Agency, with ESA, for example. And I think this is so important, that you bring in the right partners to scale projects and to see that local governments and cities can benefit from such projects and that they see a value in it. In our case, for example, GIS departments beforehand needed months to map informal settlements manually, for example. And if you see the value of doing it automatically and doing it faster, then this is something where you invest. But it's still a big question how to scale those models and how to bring them to also the local authorities and governments.
I'm going to come to you next, Steph, because one of the things that Sophie just mentioned is bringing in the right partners. And as our kind of private sector representative on this panel, I want to understand what role a company like Microsoft could bring here and how you can be part of that journey.
Sure, so it's been great to hear that actually, and as well, Raj, your experience that you mentioned, and absolutely we see this in terms of, you know, public sector is not shy of doing pilots and wanting to embed AI. I think the struggle is really around how do you go into production and how do you scale this? And that doesn't come down to it being a technology failure. If you think about why you're not moving fast enough, it really comes down to the architecture failure from a way of thinking that you need to think about the platform. It's a platform discussion. It's around governance. It's around skilling. It's not making a technology decision. And obviously I come from a technology vendor and partner, for you, hopefully a great partner. But you need to think about how you build reusable use cases that really span across departments. So I really liked what you mentioned, Sophie, which is your example and showing back the data, right? And the same we see across different cities as well. Sunderland was a great example today I spoke to. They started themselves building the platform. And now they're expanding and going after different departments like the police force. So again, great examples that you really think about platform versus technology.
Absolutely. And Warren, I see you scribbling away. So I want to firstly get you... Oh, okay. Fascinating stuff. Firstly, I just want to get your reflections on what the other panelists have said, and then I have a specific question for you.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. So I think if I go in kind of order, I think Raj's points around the importance of the challenge owner, I could not agree more. I think it's so vital that you have somebody who understands the contextual and policy area that within which the problems that they are experiencing exist, and they are uniquely placed to ensure that they're helping to craft the solution, whatever that might be. But they're also thinking beyond just them as a customer, and I think that relates to reusability. And so if we're making sure that through, say, standards on reuse or interoperability, we get people thinking about the importance of reuse beyond them, then actually I think that helps to encourage collaboration from an early stage, and you can actually identify potential partners that you might want to work with who may share some or all of the problem that you're trying to solve. There's some really great examples in UK local government of collaborative problem solving through the local digital declaration, and if people are familiar here with that, and funding projects to actually solve collaborative challenges together. I think also we've heard it several times, in fact quite a lot throughout the day, is the importance of focusing on the problems to solve and the outcomes and impact to achieve. Because if you're jumping straight into the solution, then you're certainly not really thinking about why might these problems exist for the users, for the citizens, the businesses, whoever have to interact with the cities. Sophie, I think your points around the partnerships is absolutely vital also, and I think spending time and effort to invest in collaboration, true collaboration. I think that starts not only with regards to the external partners, but internally as well, across functions. So actually, how do we help to bring the procurers, the digital leads, the lawyers, and others involved, so that they can actually have a joined-up conversation with the market and truly portray the problems that the organisation is trying to solve. So I think that's my reflections on what's been said so far.
I think we heard, as you said, we've heard some of these points kind of echo in this room through the day. Yeah. And what comes to mind, hearing your reflections there, is our conversation earlier with the built environment connective on systems thinking, and trying to pull these threads together so that we can be more effective in the way that we bring technology into cities and make it have a wider impact with, you would hope, maybe less effort than a dozen proof of concepts that won't scale. So with that in mind, my specific question for you is, will you talk to me about procurement and how that can support this process? Yeah.
So I think, so as a procurement professional myself of over 30 years, not by design, by accident, I think it's really important that procurement and procurers, and I don't just mean the procurement practitioners, I mean those who have a high degree of decision-making autonomy and budget decision-making, so the buyers effectively, think beyond what is typically a false binary choice of, I've either got to build something or I've got to buy something. That definition is far too outdated. And it comes back to, Sadaf, your point about reuse. I would say that procurers should be looking much more at a reuse-first policy, because if somebody's already solved part or a lot of the problem that you're trying to solve, then it would be a travesty on public funds to reinvent the wheel, right? So I would say reuse first, understand how you can design into your solutions stack some reusable open source assets that somebody else has got. And then what remains, I would then say, you look to the market, because if the market has already developed a solution to part of your problem, then you should just buy it. Then you come back to then, okay, well, what's remaining? I probably should be building something. But whatever you build should be made available for others to reuse as an open source asset. So you're both consuming from the ever-increasing global ecosystem of digital public infrastructure and goods, and you're contributing into that ecosystem. I think that's a really important role, a stewardship role that procurers should be playing to support this as well.
Go ahead, Raj.
I was going to say, I mean, one of the biggest barriers that we have faced in innovation, digital technology, has been procurement, and not having the right frameworks in place to enable that innovation to take place. I'll give you a good example of twice when it's worked well and maybe when it hasn't worked well. Certainly we did a pilot around tech-enabled care. Now, lots of people are doing tech-enabled care, but we did a pilot. What we found with that, we made sure there was collaboration in. We brought a technology company on board, but we also brought a number of local authorities on board and made sure it was a collaborative, so we could all learn lessons from each other. That was a fantastic project. It identified all the capabilities, it identified areas of efficiency, and it identified cost savings for us. However, because it had to go through a competitive, it's a funded project, but what we realized is you can't just use that company anymore. You've got to go out tender again. So all that stuff that we learned, all the information, a company that had learned and worked with us will have to go through the same process any other country, and that's the problem that we have. Where we've worked really well on the other side is where we've introduced accelerator programs. So accelerator programs is where we've set out a challenge and said, this is what we need, these are the outcomes we want to try to achieve. This is not a product or a solution we're looking for. We want you to help us design an outcome that we want to be able to. And what we've been able to do is bring in an innovation company, a startup, an entrepreneur to help us co-design what we want to deliver. And through that co-design, we've come up with new products and services that weren't there before. And that's given us the opportunity to bring that organization, look at how it could scale. And what we've certainly seen is that view that if this technology is not just about a single point application, because it was trying to address an outcome, it's enabled us to say, well, it's delivered capability here. How can this capability now extend across the organization? And what we've been able to do is take that proof of concept and scale it on the basis that it was co-designed and co-developed with us.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because actually we also have the experience that innovation challenges, open calls, where we bring together different stakeholders and we co-create that this is actually the project that work and that these are the project that we can also then bring from a project level to a different scale, because then you have the different stakeholders embedded and also the different demands, right? And you work, make it sure that you work on a need-driven base. So what we do at UNITAC usually is we publish open calls, and the local governments, they come in with their own ideas, and also not only with their own ideas, also with their own buy-in then, and own resources for a certain point.
I just wanted to add as well to what you mentioned, Raj, around the procurement process, and you, Warren, is everyone has transformed in, you know, what we're doing, how we're operating, but I just feel like procurement processes have not transformed, and they're turning to become a bottleneck, because the time it takes for some of these procurement processes to go through, technology has moved on, and there's again something new coming. So it feels like, you know, there's so much time and money being wasted here, and so I do think we need to really think about how can we also transform procurement processes to today's modern era. when it comes to agents. And Australia has done that. So they have actually moved from single procurement projects into a single government agreement. And that is giving them a lot more, a lot more freedom around doing POCs. And again, I come back to technology is not the failure here either. It's the processes, right? When I spoke to Sunderland, they said we can go from ideation to production within days. The challenge is procurement will not be able to match that.
I could just add to that. I think when we say procurement, we also have to think about what happens after the contract is awarded, which is a really important part of procurement. But I think what tends to happen, and you're absolutely right, Sadaf, but by the time you've done your business case, gone to market, done some early market engagement, if you have done that, you should do, done your evaluation, and then you've got to that award, that could be many, many months or years sometimes, right? And we see the pace of change of technology, it's outdated by the time you get to that contract. So I think that a really important part of the procurement process should be you design enabling contracts for rapid innovation and experimentation that expects things to change, because it will, and ever increasingly rapidly so. The design of those contracts, I think, is absolutely vital. But we also have to be looking upstream to the processes that also create the bottlenecks.
How much of that is, I will say, an internal capabilities challenge, where things have been done in a certain way for such a long time that does anyone know any different, essentially?
If I could just come on to that. I think it is largely an internal capability challenge, because a lot of the legal frameworks are actually quite enabling for this kind of thing. And certainly the UK changed its procurement legislation, the Procurement Act 2023 that came in a couple of years ago now. It has the competitive flexible procedure in it, which I don't think is being used to the extent that it should be, to allow for more iterative, innovative approaches to procurement. I often describe the difference between procurement law, which is actually what you should, what says what you can do, and procurement folklore, which is more the custom and practice that gets handed down from team to team over time. And that is the institutionally ingrained custom and practice, which can and should be challenged at the city level.
Raj, does that reflect your experience?
Yes and no. I think procurement is an issue, and procurement can be a barrier. But for internal transformation, internal innovation, it is much more than that. It is about the leadership of the organisation. It's about the culture of the organisation. And we kind of recognise that what we've done in Birmingham, which I'm really proud of, is set up something, what we call it the Digital Foundry. But in effect, it's a collaborative innovation hub that works inside the council. And it's a team that go out with a multidisciplinary team. They work directly with the service area and look at how they can improve the capabilities there, looking at the existing infrastructure we have, existing technologies we have, and see where the improvements could be. It's taking a user design capability, so make sure it's user-centered capabilities throughout the process, and we do it through sprints. So it'll be 6 to 10 week sprints to look at what can we design, and what we try to do with the service area who are co-designing this is saying what can be developed as a minimum usable product. And that usable product can be reiterated more and more. So we are addressing some of the issues around trying and develop a product that's going to take years, but to develop a product that could be developed in weeks, and that can be used and reiterated by departments and the service areas. By taking that approach, what we've been able to do is think big in terms of what that transformation looks like, but also start small and constantly iterate. And that's worked really well, and it's enabled us to develop some of the capabilities in-house using low-code platforms and no-code platforms to be able to develop that capability. So it is something that we are really pushing innovation on. I mean, the need for efficiency and effectiveness is a driver, and we've seen digital technologies and technology has been a real opportunity to change the way we do things. So yes, I think that having to watch the pennies has been a real drive for technology change. And what we've certainly seen within the city is I wouldn't say the protection, but the recognition that digital technologies and innovation needs to be embedded in everything that we do. So it is looking at innovation and transformation through a different lens that we had previously. So every service area you have is going through that transformational capability now, looking at how they're delivering services and looking what role technology can play. And that is developing and will influence our procurement processes moving forward. But we certainly recognize that as an opportunity.
Should have mentioned this at the top. We are happy to take questions. If anyone has anything, go ahead.
Yeah, but how are you thinking about the difference between efficiency and effectiveness, and how do you balance the two? Because you use those back-to-back words there, and I think they actually have very different meanings in this space.
For me, it is about cost savings and making sure processes. So for efficiency is the cost saving aspect of it. Effectiveness is, are we putting the right processes in place? Are we making sure that what we're delivering can be delivered in the seamless way, reducing unnecessary processes and making that service much more effectively in terms of where we deliver. And that effectiveness also reflects the end user. So taking that lens and saying, let's put the end user at the front. How easy is it for that person then to access the services? What experience do they get in terms of accessing it? And for me, that's the effectiveness. The efficiency comes in the savings we achieve. So there are two lenses that we look at, absolutely. Is it cost savings that justifies the business case? But we also see it from an external lens. How is it being delivered effectively, and is it making a difference to the way the service has been consumed?
I'm just going to mention about enabling formats for procurement. What is an anatomy of enabling? Is there common denominators to good procurement contracts for tech, like pro-tech procurement processes and formats, or is it varying from project to project or solution to solution?
So I would say that there should be a bunch of principles that help drive good design of procurements, but that starts before you get to the actual procurement process. So part of the planning should be about, right, for example, can we ensure, are we confident that we understand the users and the needs that need to be met and the outcomes that we're trying to achieve? Are we looking to reuse assets that might already have been available for reuse? Are we doing what we can to minimize the cost of change by reducing risk of vendor or technology lock-in? So kind of a bunch of principles that should be helping to drive good design of our business cases for change before we actually get to the procurement process. So a lot of this does end up at the door of procurement because of poor design or poor planning up front. But I think that's really where a lot of effort should go, so that when it comes to developing your outcomes-based specifications, your evaluation criteria, all of that should be to achieve the design that you've identified as part of your planning. But also, to the enabling contract point, once you've identified the outcomes, the impact you're trying to achieve, let's make sure that we actually create the contracts that don't become kind of rigid straitjackets for, through painful change control. Actually, they're fluid, they expect change, they're designed for constant evolution, and everybody's on the same page when it comes to, when I say everybody, the buyer and the supplier, the parties to the contract. And also your governance is set up to enable that change to happen. So I think some of the biggest barriers we see is where if finance haven't been involved, or the tech team haven't been involved, or whoever, if anybody that should be involved hasn't been involved, when it comes to the governance, it usually creates some kind of friction that slows things down and leads to frustration. So yeah, that's...
Can I just ask how much we think that comes down to, again, those kind of internal capabilities, and how much of it comes down to culture, and how much of it's a bit of both?
So I think it's both. So culture is really, really important, and that culture needs to obviously come from the leadership, but it also has to be driven within the organization. And look, we've done it ourselves at Microsoft. You might say, yeah, you were born in technology and, you know, you enjoy, you know, also playing with technology. But that is not true, because the change in technology requires us changing as well the way we do our day-to-day tasks. So again, I think one of the biggest mistakes I see organizations doing, and that's across public sector, but also commercial businesses, is don't focus too much on the technology. Think about how you can embed AI into your day-to-day workflows and tasks that you're doing. So I think first it's about really the culture, which then also means investing time into the skilling. I think that was a huge topic today for us as well, right? Where we discussed the importance of skilling, attracting also that way through new workforce into the organizations as well through AI. And then I think the internal capabilities are really critical as well. I think we mentioned a few times reusability, but that comes down to becoming more sustainable as well. So many times I've worked with organizations, it's quite funny, they have 10 different pilots ongoing in parallel. And after they completed the first 3 pilots and had a partner deploying it and building the environments, they realized actually pilot number 4, 5, and 6 are a combination of pilot number 1, 2, and 3. So we need to change that mindset, which is build the modular components or the platform and reuse those capabilities across your organization, which also drives efficiency. So I know Raj already mentioned that, not just economic, but also drives sustainability as well, which is really critical in today's era.
Thanks. Sophie, can I come to you with the same question? I just want to understand a slightly broader view as someone who works with obviously multiple cities and kind of sees this balance between culture and...
Yeah, we work with different cities, different governments, local governments, but anyways, one of the pillars that UNITAC has is technology development, but another one is strategies, and the most important one is capacity building. And I think that's exactly what you said. It's building the capacity, it's securing the capacity in the different institutions, it sounds so easy, no? Capacity building, but it's so difficult. And it's also, you need to get the people on board, and you need to get the people on board who have the power for decision making and to to bring this capacity into their institutions. So what we do, on one hand, we build strategic capacity, and on the other hand, as I work with the tech team, we really build tech skills, and with GIS departments, the technical capacity so that they can use technology, update the technology, do the bug fixing, and so on, because this is a long process. Anyways, what we decided at UNITAC is that when we hand over a project, it's never done. So we decided for the second phase of UNITAC, which will start in autumn this year, to also build up a digital help desk. So that is a service. So even building up capacity, you still need to attend some requests from local governments and people who still come when something does not work.
Absolutely. Raj, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, culture for a local authority is extremely important. And I think in the past, local authorities have been seen as being really risk averse. I think the world has changed since COVID. I think we are a lot more risky. We do want to understand technology. And one of the things that we've certainly done in Birmingham is to try and raise the awareness of the opportunity that technology brings. What we've started doing is show and tells. Making sure our staff are aware of what we're doing, how we're doing it, open transparency about how we've done things, bringing them along. I mentioned the Digital Foundry, which is all about raising the awareness and getting staff more involved in how new technology and new applications can be developed for them, so they have ownership right at the beginning and not feel done to. So that's part of that process of changing the culture and recognizing the importance of innovation. We've also invested money in making sure our staff have the right training. We use Microsoft a lot, but some of our staff don't know how to use some of the basic tools. So we've been trying to make sure that they've got the right capability. So our focus is about upskilling our staff, changing that culture and showing what the opportunity that technology can bring for them, but also making them aware of the emerging technologies. AI, everybody's talking about it. And what we've been trying to do is, don't be fearful of it. This is part and parcel of the future development. And it plays a role in how you deliver your services and how those services can be improved. So that those are the type of steps we're taking to try and change that culture.
Thanks, Raj. Any other questions in the room at the moment? We'll go to the gent behind you first.
Thank you. Just curious, as we've talked about bringing our staff along and the pace and path of innovation, how do you go about bringing communities along who might be a bit threatened by such innovation, seeing the risk that they might absorb, but not really seeing themselves in the final version of the solution? How do you do that transparently and in tandem?
Thanks, great question. Who would like to take this first? I feel like you might all have something on this. Go ahead.
It's a great question. I think it's so vital to ensure inclusive design of public services. So often the citizens or the businesses, the community actors are an afterthought or brought in way too late. I think one thing that through the UN work that I'm doing is to make sure that participatory and anticipatory approaches are embedded from the very beginning and all the way through. So not just when it comes to solution design, but actually when you're developing your city strategy, so that you can you make sure you prioritize the objectives around what's needed by the community. The procurement plans that follow should also be as inclusive. Equally, why not involve them as part of the evaluations and in the monitoring and evaluation of the contract once it's awarded? So I would advocate for radical transparency and advocacy for inclusion of communities.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
Anything further down the other end of the panel?
I think it's one that we all totally agree with, and it is very difficult though. We have made steps towards that. So, for example, shaping our strategy, we've made the effort. Our chief execs, our senior officers have gone out, taken the strategy and the approach we're taking into communities, not expecting people to come to us, but going to people, going to locations, saying, help us shape what our future strategy looks like, identify some of the priorities for you, and see how we can support them. So we are shifting that presence and making sure we're going to localities rather than expecting people to come to us. But it's also about using the right channels as well. We know that people want to consume data, consume information in a different way. It's making sure that we're using the right channels for that. So we're using multiple tools. So we'll use our website, we'll use social media, we'll use the right tools to get that engagement. But what has worked really, really well is making sure that we go to locations. And what we have done, certainly in our social care, is set up citizens panels, which have lived experience. And what we're doing is, as we're developing new types of opportunities, changing our models, making sure those citizens have a view, making sure they have a voice, and they are actually shaping what we do for the future. So it's not easy, and it's really difficult to engage a lot of them. The other thing that we are trying to do, I think is important, is looking at whole digital inclusion aspects of it. If we're also upskilling our citizens, making sure they have the right tools in place, have access to the right technology, we can engage with them a lot easier, a lot better, and they understand where we're going. So for us, it's not just about technology, it's about making sure our citizens can use the right tools and are skilled themselves to be able to engage in the services that we provide.
It's almost as if the latter in your commentary becomes the former, so that there's not a delta between the moments when we have the inclusive conversations and their ability to comprehend the value and what the community actually needs next. And so it seems where you ended, the value of upskilling or skilling, there needs to be some level of education, if I'm hearing you correctly, so that we can have the same dialogue and perhaps see ourselves and close that delta from what people think they need, because they may not be the innovators. It's what the innovators see as the solution. And I think that's the challenging part that we find ourselves wrestling with.
I think that's a really good point. Can I ask you to come in here?
Yeah, so it is very interesting because I think, and I'll give you an example. We have to, I think, to be successful, you have to have an impact. You know, I think we always say outcome-based on your citizen, right? On the end customer. And a great example is, I mentioned earlier the city of Abu Dhabi. I don't see any familiar faces here, so I can mention it again. You don't need to listen. And we, together with the city of Abu Dhabi, we created a digital government platform for the citizens that really go across 40 plus different departments. And they have access to over 900 services, but also some private sector services. And that is great because not only they measured the adoption of how many citizens are leveraging the platform, but also the satisfaction scores went up by 60%. And that's what you have to measure. So I think that's what you were mentioning earlier, right? The other point was it drove 70% of faster responses and processing for every application, everything that was coming through that tool, as in the platform. And again, that's a huge success, and we're seeing a lot of governments wanting to do this. And when we worked with the city of Abu Dhabi, we talked about the project. Every project has a name, and actually the portal has a name, and the name is TAM, T-A-M-M. And in Arabic, TAM means consider it done. And that's a perfect naming, obviously, for that solution. So I think, to your point, you need to focus on the outcome. You need to deliver the results, because if your end customer, the citizens, get faster, better results, then that's what they want.
Any other questions in the room for now? I have one which might change gear. Go ahead.
I'm just curious, you work a lot with smaller cities and smaller communities, many in the rural context. And maybe this is a question for the ladies. Have you seen any sort of cost-effective, resource-effective solutions working in these sort of smaller, the budgets are smaller, the contexts are a little more complex in one sense and easy in another? I don't know if you have any kind of use cases from working in small rural cost effectiveness.
So far, we haven't done that. We mainly working in bigger urban centers, but I think secondary cities, smaller rural area cities, it's super important, but no experience from my side, unfortunately.
So we have a few, and on that, I think it comes around interoperability and building that platform. So in many of these rural cities, they're part of the same country. We have been working with them to create that kind of shared services. So instead of everyone creating and recreating the same solutions, we are building and leveraging the existing one and expanding to them from a leveraging perspective. So that's been helping. But then again, if you're talking about rural areas scattered across different continents and countries, then there is a lot we can do around leveraging low-code type of cost-effective solutions.
I could just add to that. I think there's a pilot that the ITU did with Digital Impact Alliance Dial, Smart Villages. I think it's piloted in right, okay, in Niger. So yeah, perhaps worth having a look at that.
Next question for the audience.
So yeah, just coming back to the kind of bottleneck problem of procurement, which is very interesting. It seems to be right across the UK particularly. And there's like 300 councils in the UK. But is there anywhere where there's a central repository or a central database where all the good use cases have can be found, so that you're not repeating stuff? And we heard earlier from Sunderland Council, which is voted the smartest city in the UK, that they've done a marvellous 20-year contract with an integrator, and it's all going wonderfully smoothly and brilliant. So if they can do it, and they procure it very quickly apparently, if they can do it, why can't all the other cities follow rather than have to reinvent every time?
It's a no-brainer, right?
Yeah, we use AI to help us find that.
Yeah. Well, so there's an example. I mean, it's slightly. It relates absolutely to your question. I saw that the Ministry of Justice recently published what they call, I think it's the reuse library, and it's an AI curated list of things which exist across the public sector, and that includes things like design standards, principles, and blah, 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 components as well. But yeah, you would have thought, particularly for local government, where cash is tight, expectations are increasing, and I know that through the local digital declaration, the Ministry MHCLG with GDS, Government Digital Service, put in place in 2018, I think it was. There was an ambition for this kind of thing, but it requires commitment to people to contribute to it and use from it as well. But it's a fantastic idea. It should be done totally.
I mean, there are some examples of where that is happening, and it does tend to come with funded programs. So you've got PropTech at the moment, which is supporting local authorities around some of their planning regulations, looking at how we introduce technology into those. And there is a site where all projects that have been funded through that program are being listed, openly available to all the partners, so you're learning from what other people are doing, so you're not repeating that. So there's beginning to be things like that, but yeah, you're right. There isn't a national, as far as I'm aware, a sort of platform that enables you to take that, but there are some elements where that sharing does take place, and especially on funded programs that are cross-cutting.
Maybe I'll just follow up on that, because I know about that program. I think they're on their 6th run, aren't they, with local authorities. But for me, that's great. It's very much a pilot, testing technology in a pilot sense. But when they work, there's no then kind of transition that they've worked in Barnet Council, so therefore all other councils need to have a look at that and see whether it's appropriate for them. There's no kind of edict from someone to say, do that. And you think that would be the most efficient way of working in a regional authority, perhaps?
I mean, do you want me to answer?
Please do.
I don't disagree with you. I think different cities have different demands and different circumstances, and we've seen what Sunderland have done, and we are talking to Sunderland. We've seen what Manchester have done, we are talking to Manchester. We do talk, and we do try to identify what really works and what doesn't work. The issues sometimes you have, and we come to panels like this, we talk wonderfully about all the achievements we have, but we don't often talk about some of the failures that we have. And I think having those forums actually list some of the failures would also be really useful to actually start saying, don't do this rather than do this. And I think the problem with putting out things on a public environment where you have got failure taints some of these things. I don't know, I might be wrong. So you tend to put out really success stories, which gives the impression that this is wonderful, it'll work everywhere, and it won't necessarily work because you have a different set of circumstances. We do collaborate with other cities. We have a core cities function. We have other areas where we do try and talk to them. So there is learning going on, absolutely lots of learning going on. But you're right, it's different circumstances, and what we've got to think about is look at the commonalities. And I think you mentioned earlier, thinking of as platforms as products rather than individual projects. We've got to be thinking about how does this technology translate to the circumstances that we have, rather than saying, how did that project make a difference, but how does that underpinning technology really make a difference to us? And that's where we should be thinking more about the cross-sector learning there.
Thanks, Raj. We had one more question at the back here.
I was going to ask a question on this project to product transition. Is like industry has made this jump, and now governments are starting to look at it. There's some edicts out of the US to stop funding projects in the software space and fund products. How are you actually bringing that to life in your individual kind of councils, and then contracting product development, incremental capability development over projects with an end date?
I think you first, and we'll work our way down.
The short answer is we're trying. So taking that approach and looking at a product-based approach rather than a product-based approach rather than a project-based approach is what we're trying to do. So the work that we're doing internally certainly is about how do we create common platforms? How do we create the enabling infrastructure that can then deliver multiple use cases on a single platform rather than creating multiple platforms and individual systems? So really taking that product type of approach. We've started doing that. We're still on that journey, but that is the type of area that we're trying to look at. So certainly in one or two of the applications where perhaps we're looking at things like, a redaction of service or translation services, one department might want it as a project, But we won't think of it that way. We will think about how do we create the right platform for translational services? How do we create the right platform for redaction services, taking that lens rather than a project for, let's do one specific thing for a specific department.
Go. Not for you?
I think it doesn't fit very well to our case. We try to work not only project-based, platform-based, but it always depends on the funding. Each project that we do is a funded project, and it depends if we have long-term funding, then we can do more than a pilot. If we just have short-term innovation project funding, then we can just do a pilot and think how we can in the future scale it. And then if there is a need for such a project or for such a pilot that we have developed, then there will be also funding to scale it. So that's a little bit the logic how we work.
I mean, that is a really interesting point, actually, that I think is applicable to UK councils as well. Money is tight, and you have to follow the money. So there might be opportunities to run pilots in certain verticals within a city in certain departments that don't exist elsewhere, and that becomes another challenge in its own right in how cities prioritise innovation and the projects that exist there. I might be speaking out of turn. Raj, does that make any sense?
No, it does, absolutely. I mean, I think we have changed the way we operate. I mean, before it was always about chasing the money, certainly from the organisation. And Digital Birmingham was a really innovative organisation, part of Birmingham City Council, and our role was to work with the universities, look at Horizon 2020, look at the cutting edge stuff and try and bring some of that stuff into the city. What we've recognised is that some of that technology is too far advanced for us to really have the benefits of it now. And what we need is that technology that benefits us now, not in 5 or 10 years' time. So it is a different lens in terms of how we're approaching this. And we're not doing projects for project's sake anymore. We're making sure that what we're developing has a longer-term strategic impact on the organisation and can be scaled to deliver multiple services.
Well, thank you. Anything to add from either of you guys here?
I just was going to add, saying, what you mentioned, Raj, is exactly what we are also proposing, which is build your capabilities, build this modular approach, not so much project-based. So you mentioned translation, right? So build agents with the skill of translation that you can then kind of move across different projects. That's what we're seeing, is happening in the market right now. So yeah, I agree with you with what you said.
I was just going to add, like Jen Palka, she's a big fan of it from the US, talking about fund projects, teams, not projects. And I think the importance of investing in enduring multidisciplinary teams who are empowered to work on the right things is much better than that kind of stop-start mentality that comes with projects. So yeah, wholly advocate the same. It's great.
We're nearly at the end of the panel. And I just want to come to each of you with your kind of final thoughts, your top tip for local governments to take away here, regardless of where they are, their size, and how to bring departments together, I think, to make sure that the way they innovate from pilot and into the way they scale is maybe a bit more joined up, a bit more aligned with community need. So Daph, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think just to summarize really quickly in a sentence, for me, I think the importance here is pilots are great. You prove the concept. But if you think about platforms, that's really where you drive transformation within cities. So again, I'm thinking, really think about your platform choices, the components you require, the capabilities, the skills, and then finally, you require governance to make this really an ongoing, scalable solution. So the governance is critical, which comes with cultural changes, skilling, and all of those that you can't just buy from a technology perspective.
Thanks. Warren?
So one thing I'd say, look sideways is one of the was the original design principles of UK government. And that goes to your point to say, look, you're probably not the first to be thinking about this problem. So, look outside of your organisation, see who's already doing stuff, and be humble about potentially reusing work that others have done. And I don't think you should be constrained by your own geographies. Look globally to see who's doing what, and reuse things that have been proven in other contexts as well, and adapt.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think there is a few points that are important. So that are sustainable funding models, it's data governance, as you mentioned, and it's also trust building, so that the relationship, and also when you share data, you work with data, there is a lot of trust behind that you have to build up.
For me, I think pilots are absolutely important in supporting the cultural change within the organisation. And what's really essential and has to happen is that we bring the organisation along with you. So for me, co-design, that collective, collaborative co-design is probably key to ensuring scalability.
Thank you all so much. That is a wrap for the panel. I very much appreciate your time and insight. Give them a hand. Thank you.